Good morning. We left off page Zion of the Mimer, line 17, and we had a question about the idea that the Tzemach Tzedek says when speaking about the Mila of Torah, he speaks about it as being Mashal Hakadmoini, the mashal that contains, just like a mashal contains in it the nimshal, so to the level of Chachma Ilah contains in it the Ein Sof. And we had a difficulty with it. What does the idea of mashal have to do over here? Seemingly, the mashal is something that's contradictory to the entire idea. Mashal is something that is concealing and covering over and so on. So we started getting into the idea of that in a mashal, there is a greater concealment than a riddle. When you have a mashal is something that makes sense on its own. Being that makes sense on its own, if you don't realize, if you're not looking, if no one points out to you that there is a nimshal, so then the mashal just stands on its own, and I don't know, there's nothing more to it. Something that's a riddle, the very fact that's a riddle right away tells you, there's something behind this. This makes no sense in and of itself. The statement, the sentence, the question is seemingly nonsensical. So it's already indicating that there's something greater than that. So Tab explained that's the difference between Nigla Torah and Nimis Torah, which is what the Maimer of Sadris Melech over there is talking about. Tzemach Tzedek's note is on that in Nigla Torah we can make a mistake and think that all it is just a halacha. Since the halacha is something that makes sense. So all it is a halacha, Shmaim, Metalis, Daldrishus, or Shabbos, all these different Sharshanachas, all these different things, that's what it's about. There's nothing more to it. There's no deeper layers. There's no Ein Sof. That is just like a mashal that hides the fact that when you say a certain mashal and you don't know to look and that there is a nimshal, fine, it's a mashal. It not fine so much. It's a statement. It's a story. It's something like we gave yesterday the example from Eishes Chaya. A chida, on the other hand, a riddle that is similar to Pnimis HaTorah, whether Pnimis HaTorah of Kabbalah, whether we're learning the stories in the Torah, we're reading Agadah. All these things, just looking at them superficially makes one scratch their head, makes one think that there must be something deeper. So even though there is less comprehension of the superficial idea, but it hints at something greater. So now the Rebbe is going to bring this back to what the Tzemach Tzedek says in the Alter Rebbe's Maimer, in the note on the Tzemach Tzedek's Maimer. The Alter Rebbe's, the Tzemach Tzedek's note on the Alter Rebbe's Maimer says that the idea is a mashal. The idea of the Torah is called Mishal HaKadmoni. Yes, Shloimer, we could say, this is the intention of the Tzemach Tzedek in what he wrote. Therefore, the Torah is called the mashal, that is the vessel that contains in it the Kadmon Shaloilam, the Ein Sof. It's a vessel for the infinite light of Hashem. Also the concealment of a mashal, meaning also the concealment of the revealed part of Torah. One has to change it and affect that it should become a vessel. What is the idea of a vessel? When a person studies the inner part of the Torah, that we spoke about earlier in the Maimon, brought down from the Alter Rebbe, that it's called salt, and salt sweetens the meat, gives flavor to the meat, even though the salt itself is flavorless, because like we said before, Chassidus is like this riddle, that it itself, the Pnimis HaTorah, is something that's not really grasped. That's the idea of flavor. Tam can mean flavor, tam can mean reason, understanding. In a gam hamashal nigla Torah, what happens is when we flavor the revealed part of the Torah, nasa kli learns of Baruch Hu. So then that causes us to see and transform and show how the mashal, instead of hiding the Ein Sof, it's actually a revelation. It's actually a vessel for the Ein Sof. Let's learn one more paragraph, line 24. And to add, look at the Torah, Shambas Paul Sasif, over there, and look at the Torah. At the beginning of that paragraph, Medubar Oidis Inyan has Mesiras Nefesh. It speaks about the idea of self-sacrifice. That it comes from the essence of the soul beyond intellect. Over there, he speaks about the different in Lysage's Malach. It talks about the different powers of the soul, and then there's the essence of the soul that's higher than the soul power. So the Rebbe says, we could say, being Mishal HaKadmoni, that the notes of the Tzemach Tzedek concerning the Mishal HaKadmoni, that Torah is considered the mashal for the early one, meaning the vessel that contains in the Torah itself. Is associated not just with the words that are that directly before it and close to it. The Torah is enclosed, very essence of the infinite light of Hashem. So it's not just out to explain and to elaborate and that on that concept. That note that Tzemach Tzedek goes all the way back also to the beginning of that paragraph. Oidus Inam Mesiras Nefesh, concerning the idea of self-sacrifice. How's the connection with that and self-sacrifice? Since the idea of self-sacrifice that comes from the essence of the intellect, of the essence of the soul, is beyond intellect. That it's totally nullified to the infinite light of Hashem. That's completely beyond the level of Chokhmah. So it's our part of the soul that's beyond intellect that connects with the aspect of Hashem that's completely beyond intellect. This empowerment for our avodah, and it's expressed in it the Mishal HaKadmoni, the avodah of the mashal of the early one, to transform from the idea of that which is a mashal, we should make it and transform it into a vessel for the early one, for the one that's the first of the world, meaning Hashem. So this Mesiras Nefesh that we have internally, that we have that core connection with Hashem's essence, that empowers us. In other words, alongside what we said about the study of Pnimius HaTorah, that Melech, that's soul, also the fact that we deep inside have this connection beyond intellect that empowers us to reveal the Ein Sof that's in Torah as well, in Nigla Torah. Any questions before we go on? Okay, Ois Gimel on page Ches, line 6. This is also hinted in the fact that in this very note, where the Tzemach Tzedek writes about the idea of the Torah is called Mishal HaKadmoni, because it's a vessel for Kadmoni Shaloilam to the Ein Sof. So he says, like it's written on the Maimer of Purim. So the Rebbe poses an interesting diuk on this. Usually, when the Tzemach Tzedek points to Mamarim, which is constantly throughout his notes on Chutei Torah, he points out for further elaboration to other Mamarim, he will say the title of the Maimar. Here, instead, he just gives the idea, like it says in the Maimer of Purim. It doesn't give you the title. The title is Chayav Inish L'Psumah. Person is obligated to become so well spiced and so on, so that he can't tell the difference between Arar Ham and Baruch Mordechai. Not like it says the title Chayav Inish L'Psumah Kerogel Gamlit Tzemach Tzedek B'Tziyunim Likra Maimer Al Shem Eskolosei, like it's customary, also by the Tzemach Tzedek in his notes to identify the Maimer by its beginning pasuk. So why over here does the Tzemach Tzedek change from his normal approach and say, as it says in the Maimer of Purim? say, as it says in the Maimer, titled Chayavin Shlupsum. Hagdim, so we need to preface this. Hine Ikeri not Purim, the main idea of Purim, Huachiv Lupsumi Adlo Yadachul, is the obligation to become so spiced until he does not know the difference between Arur Haman and Baruch Mordechai. So the Rebbe says a very interesting point. There are different mitzvahs that we do on Yom Tovim, including there's different mitzvahs that we do on the Yom Tov of Purim. But all those mitzvahs have certain time constraints, both when we're supposed to do it, up to when we're supposed to do it, when we're not supposed to do it, and when we fulfill the obligation, or when the time is over for doing that, still within the time of Purim. Megillah, one needs to read twice. The night of Purim and the day of Purim. Once they read the Megillah, both those times, once fulfilled the obligation. Shalachmanis, Matanas Lev Yoinim, Sudas Purim. One has an obligation to do it during Purim day. Once one has done it, they have done it. They fulfilled the obligation. The only obligation that Rebbe says that there is an obligation 24/7 on the day of Purim. So he says, is the mitzvah of Adlo Yada, line 12. Zoya mitzvah yechida the chiyuvahu b'chol meshach yom Purim b'chol rega v'rega shabbai. In every single moment of Purim, there is an obligation to be in the state of Adlo Yada. It's not just by the Suda, it's not just in the morning, it's not just at night. Throughout the entire 24/7 period of the day of Purim, one has an obligation to be in a way of Adlo Yada ben Arham Mark. If you want to know a little bit more about it, he brings about this in Kutesichas Chelik Zayin on Parshas Vayikra. He speaks about it, and then the Rebbe says that this is something that you could do it at once, but the effect of it and the manifestation of it is the entire day. But again, I'm not going to get now into the halachas of it and so on. You can look it up in that sikha if you want. So he says further, concerning the explanation. What does it mean a person needs to get so intoxicated until he does not know the difference between cursed is Haman and Mordechai is blessed? It's brought down the Mefarshim about this Gemara. The intention of this is, the meaning of this is, he would not know to calculate that the phrase Arur Haman is the same gematria of Baruch Mordechai. So that's how intoxicated he has to be. He doesn't have a clear mind. He can't run mathematical equations in his mind. That's the level of intoxication. That's what's brought down a way how to fulfill that obligation. There's another way that the Rebbe used to laugh and say that some oilamish like to be yotzei this way. You drink l'chaim and then you fall asleep. So then you don't know the difference between Arur Haman and Baruch Mordechai because you're asleep, you're unconscious. Anyway, the Rebbe says we need to understand the different gematriyos that are mentioned in Torah. They're not by happenstance. They're not just happen to be. It just came out, nice little connection over here. Ella gematria moira ala shayches v'ashva pnimis mishnei and yonim shemisporim shava. The gematria is an indicator of the association and a certain type of equation. That's an internal association, an internal equation between the two things that share the same number, the same numerical value. Like it's understood from what it says in Sharichad V'Emunah, where it speaks over there that How were all the creations created from the Asara Amaris? Since we know that the Asara Amaris is the highest of all creations, in the Asara Amaris it doesn't say the word Evan, it doesn't say any many other words. How does different individual creations get their life force? So the Alter Rebbe explains that Tanivroim Shenikroim B'Shem those creations that they are called by a certain name, that is a gematria of a different word that says in the Asar Amoris. That is their chayes. Yet, hine hachayes halikis shebehem nimshechas metevezu shebasar Amoris. There's an association over here. The fact that it's this word in the Asar Amoris that becomes the gematria, and from it we will now give vitality to something else via gematria. So therefore, it shows that they're associated, or else it wouldn't have been a gematria of this word, because it means that the chayes of this word is coming down through gematria into something else. Why in gematria? So the Alter Rebbe explains gematria indicates a lessening of life force, a lessening of power and strength and vitality and energy of Hashem that was lessened so much that it doesn't even have the same meaning. The only thing that it shares in common is that they have the same value, they have the same number of soul of godly powers in them. That's the way the Alter Rebbe says it over there in Sharich and Vermont. This, by the way, the reason why, when it comes to gematrias, the Rebbe even mentions it in passing many times, that don't try this at home. We cannot make up gematrias on our own. Gematrias, like he said over here, are gematrias that say in Torah-based gematrias indicate they have a connection. If I'm going to come up, like I remember when the personal computer became very popular, so then there were these discs. You remember the floppy disks? Any of you are old enough to remember that? They had all these programs for or maybe at least one program, gematria programs. Put in any word, and they'll give you a gematria of every other word that has that. That's not gematrias according to Torah. According to Torah, it's the other way around. Because two words have a connection, that's why the number is the same. Not the number the same is makes the connection. It says, line 26, therefore it's understood that when we're talking about our case, Arur Hamam and Baruch Mordechai, that there must be sheyesh gam hashva pnimis, there also must be some type of inner equation, bein inyanim shoinim, between different things, that their number, that their name, or their title, or their phraseology is the same value of gematria. So the Rebbe asks, top of page test, Al Pisa in moving according to this, it's not understood. What's the association? What's the equation between cursed is Haman to Mordechai being blessed? There are two opposite things. Here we are, the idea of Kedusha, and here's the idea of Klippa. Klippa and Kedusha are two opposites. How can we say they have the same gematria? It makes no sense to have the same gematria. Here, the explanation this is the Hinay. The life force and vitality of everything is the supernal attention and intention that for which it was created. In other words, we know throughout Chassidus it speaks about that Hashem's will created everything. Hashem willed everything into creation. What is that will from? Where is that will coming from? What is that will about? That will is Hashem's, or what's behind that will. I wanted, and therefore a Yid became. I wanted, and therefore the world became. What was behind that want? Hashem had a desire to have a home down here alone. Therefore, he wanted the Yid to make that, and therefore I wanted a world to be there, and I wanted this object to be able to fulfill it. So every single thing that comes into being into this world What is its true life? What is its true vitality? Hashem's will. And what's behind Hashem's will? The kavana that that thing serves in fulfilling Hashem's purpose. The kibun she kavanas disavas araham bibishvil nafafichu, since the intention of the coming into being and the being made of klippa, the idea of araham, is for the sake of transformation, of making it transformed. This means this means through the avoid of the Yidden, it should become transformed to Mordechai being blessed. That is the intention, and making and bringing into being all matters that are bad, to transform them to day and to light. The famous pasuk that says the Gam Roshel Yom Rod Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, brings on the footnote, that means that the Eibishter made a Rosham. Why? So that the badge should be turned over Liyom into day. It says Nimtza comes out, Kabona Shal Ar Haman, the godly life force, the intention and the purpose of Ar Haman, Baruch Mordechai, is that should be that Mordechai should be blessed. And footnote 22, he says, on the other hand, it's not right away visible. When we see Haman, we see a negative thing. Therefore, it's only gematria, that gematria shows that the connection between the two is a concealed connection. It's not an open connection. That's the inner meaning of that. He does not know to differentiate. Being cursed is Haman and Mordechai is blessed. Transformed the idea that Haman is cursed to the idea of Mordechai being blessed. That our purpose is to transform them so high and so great that it should be in such a way that there's no differentiation between them. That's how much we need to transform them, and that is kivun shegatim order Haman nasa baruch Mordechai, since also the order Haman becomes baruch Mordechai. But even more in depth, in the order Haman, when a person sees the matter of order Haman, Harehum roya miyad, he immediately sees. The adrab, even more so, roya rak, he only sees as a kavana shebesoiche baruch Mordechai, the intention and purpose in it, which is baruch Mordechai. This is the idea that Rebbe says. That's the concept of that. Just like a person needs to accept with joy when it comes something good, so too he needs to accept joyously when something chas v'sholem not good happens. Why? The Chazal are teaching us this message that we need to examine and look at everything that may seem to be a negative and look at it l'chatchila as a positive, and look at it as a good thing and as a high and lofty thing. Any questions?
What when you reference that computer program that correlated all the words with the same gematria, why wasn't there a connection?
Because it's artificial. It's AI. It's artificially made by human beings. It's not the way the gematrias work. It's the things that Torah establishes and says that there's a gematria between them is because they have an innate connection, and therefore Torah reveals to us that their gematria is the same. You can't reverse engineer and say, since something has the same gematria, therefore they must have a connection. Therefore, they have the same meaning, etc.
How does this relate to the 13 principles we use in the Gemara for?
I don't think it relates to that. At least not off the top of my head. I can't see that.
That's just pure logic.
It's not necessarily logic. I would say it's more like a code. But we're going off topic. Okay, second paragraph on page 10, line 19. Yet we still need to understand seemingly when we transform the two, the Arer Ham to Baruch Mordechai, as not the two. We transform the Arer Haman Azai be'emes ein chiluk b'neim. So then, truly, there's no difference then between Arer Haman and Baruch Mordechai once we have transformed it. In Kain Lomer Nemer Ad Lo Yoda Ben Arer Haman Baruch Mordechai. Why does it say that he does not know? He becomes so intoxicated, he does not know the difference between them. From the fact that Gemara says he does not know the difference between them, that's indicating there is a difference. But because the person is intoxicated, he doesn't know the difference. So how does that fit? Is there a difference? Is there not a difference? This will be understood by first prefacing what the Chazal say. Tshuva is great, that even intentional sins become for the person like merits. Through the tshuva, out of love, even the godly sparks that are to be found in the intentional sins, that are transformed to merits. And in this matter is where the Baal Tshuva find a greater level than Tzaddik. Exactly like the ruling that in the place where Baal Tshuva stand, complete Tzaddikim cannot stand over there. Why not? Tzaddikim refine only the sparks of permitted matters, that their vitality and life force comes from klipas noiga, which is not such a low clip. That as opposed to the spark that fell into prohibited matters, that comes from the three completely Talmudic klippas. According to Torah, there's no way to refine them. You cannot engage with things in Shalshat Meis to refine those sparks. Just the opposite. Not only can't you refine them, but one needs to push them away, and then one needs to disengage and not have anything to do with them. That is all in the world of Tzaddik. As opposed to Baal Tshuva Mevarim, they refine also the sparks that fell in the three completely Talmudic klippas. Even those sparks that fell into intentional sin. A person that does a sin intentionally, so the Alter Rebbe explains, is lowered even at the prohibited matter. Since they're against the will of Hashem. The prohibited matters were created by Hashem's will. But as far as a Yid Chas v'Shalom engaging in the prohibited activities, etc., that is against Hashem's will. So a Yid committing an Aveda, a Zodin, an intentional Aveda, that's even a lower spark of godliness over there embedded. Then, in other words, the spark of godliness is embedded in even a lower place than the sparks in the prohibited item itself. Gam Heim Yehavkol is that also those sparks of that may should be transformed to merit. The reason why tshuva has also the power to refine also the sparks that are intentional sins, even though they are the opposite of his will. Well, if he should tshuva magas, because tshuva reaches in Hashem's very essence, the level that's called Baal Harotz, the master of the will, the one who possesses the will of Torah mitzvahs, the one who created and made and came up with the will for Torah mitzvahs. He is not obligated by, and he's not at all limited by the will. And therefore, even though Hashem wanted Torah mitzvahs, but it was Hashem that wanted Torah mitzvahs. And it was Hashem that wanted that certain things that are not Torah mitzvahs are beyond the pale and we're not supposed to engage with them. So Hashem himself is beyond that limitation of what he wants and what he doesn't want. So tshuva, because it's rooted in Hashem's very essence, the Baal Harotzen, it is able to break down the barrier and take things which are the opposite of Hashem's will and to transform it into Zachiyos. We'll stop over here. Any questions?